Shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I extend a very good morning to everybody. And yes, it's a Sunday morning. But we are very happy here to be with all of you. It's an online media and I cannot see all of you. But that's how we just have to get used to working online. And knowing that, yes, across the screen where I cannot see, there are 77 participants as I'm able to see, my screen shows me. So we're going to talk today on vocal for local. Now that this is something that's really coming on after the COVID-19, we all know how we have to stand for the local. So we're going to orient ourselves in upon this vocal for local and tell you how we started aligning to this years ago when the practice started. And today when we are speaking about this, we are kind of relieved and we're very happy that, yeah, this thought process started off years ago. Let me just give you a quick background that me and Habib studied in the Vishweshwarya Regional College of Engineering, and then we went off to the US for our post-graduation. We went separately, of course, he went first, I went later. But when you are young students and you're exposed to the Western culture and you read in your history of architecture all about modern architects and contemporary architects, then you have stars in the eyes and yeah, you also want to work like them. So when we finished our masters and we came back to India and set up this Smitha and Habib Khan partnership, whatever small little projects that we got, we wanted them to stand out. We wanted them to be out of those glossy books. We wanted them to be the way we had seen the projects unfold in the US. And even in Nagpur at that time, the larger projects that were happening were all along those fashionable lines, I must say, or lines of, in those days, it was postmodernism and deconstruction, which was hitting the headlines, So we would see projects happening in Nagpur also. So you see, our first early small project started off by becoming deconstruction in nature. Because when you deconstruct a project, it stands out. So, when you're young architects, what else do you want? You want a project to stand out. It is then when we were seeing this big project, because when you see someone else's project, then you are able to critique better than when we saw a little project and the success that it was getting in those days. So when we saw these big projects, which were also postmodern or deconstruction in nature, we started understanding, yes, something's going wrong somewhere. Because when we look at our society or our community, and then we understand how traditional we are in the way we live, the way we dress, the way we carry out our day-to-day activities. And then you look at our buildings and the kind of buildings we as architects are making for our clients who are very traditional because they are not educated in architecture per se the way we are. We are exposed to architecture across the world. We are exposed to international style and deconstruction and postmodernism. These are only names that make no sense to the society. But they're looking out for a fresh expression of architecture. And when an architect gives them something called postmodern, well, they lap it up. But at the end, as young architects, we started thinking that there is something wrong and we need to start thinking. And here is where the thought process started. Now, I'm going to start with telling you what the thought process was. And then, since we are talking and preaching about this thought process, we would like to continue on and show you our endeavor, a little effort that we have put in actual building. So our practice kind of aligns with what we are talking about or what we thought in those days as young architects and continue to believe today in practice. One second, I'm not able to go ahead. Here, I would like to start it by simply saying that, yes, man has always shared a symbiotic relationship with nature. And this kind of a relationship that we have with nature results in a contextual framework. This contextual framework, it connects to the land, to our land, the land to which we belong to. And so here you see it in the pictures, how we are responding, how this is basically the milieu. This is basically our culture. This is where we come from. So if that is true, then it should be true of architecture also. So here is there was a time when this kind of thing was wisdom to everybody. And the way people were, so also they made their architecture. So the architecture is also rooted to the land. Like people are rooted to the land, the architecture is also rooted to the land. And so architecture was, and architecture should essentially be contextual. You see here how the buildings are responding to the topography, how they're taking from the local materials. You see the warm hue of the bricks that is coming up into the buildings. And hey, look at this. That's what the earth is made of. And you see how when it got molded into something which is a man-made creation, which is architecture, which is a shelter for human beings. You see how that which is so rugged and that which is natural has been tamed, and while it is still subservient to nature, and yet it is there for the human beings. So here is something that Habib basically loves to say whenever he is out on addressing young architects and the architecture fraternity. He says, "Jaane kahan gaye wo din? Where did all those days go when we were constructing like this?" So these are examples of vernacular architecture, in which they're essentially made of earth, which is just under our feet and available to all of us. And just notice the climate responsiveness, the land responsiveness, and the tradition responsiveness of this architecture. And this is right across the globe. You go just anywhere and vernacular is something that is so very contextual. And you can't even differentiate where the nature stops and where the man-made shelter begins. And these are some of the spectacular vernacular architectures that we have. So architecture is not only rooted to the ground upon which it sits, but it is also an extension of all of us. People, culture, our milieu. Now, whenever we make an architectural creation, see, every architectural creation is always a step in an onward evolution of the land to which it belongs. So when we started with the humble dwellings, we come to the more public architecture, the civic architecture, and there we find that it had
I can't hear. Can you all hear?
No.
No. There seems to be some problem with the connection.
Can you hear me?
No, sir. No, sir.
If the line problem may be resolved, maybe it will become okay.
Can you see my screen? Can you hear me?
No, ma'am.
No?
We can hear you, but the screen is not open.
The screen is not open?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
And
Yeah.
the screen?
The screen is not open
Just
yet.
screen share it again. Share the screen again.
Okay, okay. Okay, I'm sorry, this disconnectivity is one of the things to just take in our stride. Okay, here is where we are talking about some of the very important civic buildings that we have in India. So see how long architecture goes back into history. With over 3,000 years of recorded history, our Indian vernacular traditions grew and evolved to form a very strong and cohesive architecture. And while this was an evolution going on in land, we had people coming into our land, because this land was such a land of promise that when these people came in, our evolution grew richer with the assimilations and inputs from the various cultures that came into our land, coming in, including the British. I mean, this is an example of how the Mughal architecture, the architecture that was brought from outside the boundaries of India into India, assimilated and made something which is called Indo-Saracenic architecture. This is the architecture of Humayun's tomb. And here, of course, the British and the Gateway of India. And you see how Indian it is, in spite of taking in its symmetry, its geometry, its form, which is all very European, but it's still very Indian. So it's all assimilating. The vernacular process of growth and evolution continued in spite of changed and newer functional needs and expressions. Even we needed a government building or we needed a victory gate, it kept changing. And in spite of geographical, climatic, and cultural diversities, it still itself into a cohesive expression. Here we are seeing how it is mingling into what was an evolution happening in our own land into the various cultures that came in. And these are various different regions. This is from Goa, and we are now syncing it with the Portuguese architecture that was brought in. And here is when Industrial Revolution and its effects came into India, when the British were ruling India, and this evolution was interrupted because of it. And I would still say the buildings are very sane. I'm just going to go on now to talking about something very different. So this is the result of globalization that started off with the coming in of Art Deco. And these are some buildings in Mumbai. And after the Industrial Revolution came in something called modern architecture. And here we have Le Corbusier in his full glory. And this is the Capitol complex of Chandigarh. Modern Indian architecture of today intentionally defies older neighbors rather than standing beside them in peace. Now that's where the conflict started. There was no conflict really as long as cultures were coming in, assimilating, and we were still having an architecture that belonged to us. We were able to identify with it. What modern architecture did was something like, as you're seeing over here, it was extremely chaotic and simply wanted to defy. Whenever industrialization and development penetrated, impersonal forms intruded upon traditional profiles of cities, towns, and villages. This is an example in Nagpur, where the Sabha Mandap of that temple was taken off, and instead of reconstructing it in a style that would be sympathetic to the standing shikhar, you see what they are doing. The predictability and monotony of today's modern architecture is astonishing, and it is anguishing. You don't even know from where these buildings are, which of this building is made in Mumbai, which of them is in China, and which of them is in somewhere in the Western world. One doesn't know. Now here is something that we are building in Nagpur. We find that this is somewhere very close to our home. What kind of buildings are we making today? This is a Tukaram Sabhagruha in which marriages take place. You know how our weddings are? We are so traditional still. And then, we have this Tukaram Sabhagruha. So we do call it Tukaram Sabhagruha, but look at its architecture. There's no sink in between. Semantics is really gone for a toss. I'm showing you some more buildings in Nagpur. We have a love for pastiche Western. And we're really amused because I'll tell you this building belongs to the Nagpur Improvement Trust. They are a body which is responsible for developing the city of Nagpur. And yeah, this is their building. And yeah, this is a detail of the dome. It started off with great intentions. Everybody loves Renaissance architecture. Even we would love it if we were walking on the street somewhere in Italy and we say, why this architecture is so fantastic? Why can't we have it? I want a piece of this for my city. But when you get a piece of it for your city and you build it like this, then we really have to think, where are we going? So yes, we are happy in what we are doing. This is pastiche, neither here nor there. And then we come to this kind of thing. What kind of buildings are these? Do we all think when we are looking at this evolution that something has really gone amiss with our contemporary architecture? That as Indians with 3,000 years of recorded history, we have to perform better, that we owe a responsibility? See, the chain of evolution is totally broken when you look at this kind of architecture happening under the skies, temperatures which touch 45 degrees, and these are glass blocks and we are inside. So all vernacular architecture was ingrained. I'm going to now talk of vernacular architecture. Would you like to say something? I think I would.
Yeah, I mean, what we are doing these days is the previous slide that we saw, we're not only making glass boxes which are unsuitable to our climate, context, culture, and we are protruding them out so that all the sun comes in. And this is baseless and senseless copying of the Western architectural model, wherein they want to bring the sun in and we want to keep the sun out. And that is the fundamental difference that is happening between the non-contextual architecture that is happening these days. So we're creating problems and then trying to give solutions to those problems. But vernacular architecture, was ingrained. Can we go to the next slide? Vernacular architecture was always, ingrained in freedom. There was a sense of freedom, like we all saw the slides wherein there was a framework within which the vernacular architecture was fitting in. And this freedom always came with responsibility. And that responsibility was that it was fitting into the contextual, the climatic, and the cultural framework. And traditionally, creativity was always linked with common sense. Today, we have lost the sense of common sense. We are creating problems and trying to give solutions to it. Can we go quicker, faster? All vernacular architecture relied on logic and purpose. Like I said, there was logic and purpose. Indian vernacular architecture respected growth in conjunction with continuity. There was a continuity that Smita was talking of. There was a chain of evolution that happened, and that was the continuity that we're talking of. And it exhibited creative and aesthetical details, which are often solutions to a problem. I just talked about it, that the problem is being created these days, and then we're trying to give solutions to those problems. We are creating those problems knowingly. And the traditional architecture, the vernacular architecture actually was a solution to a problem rather than creation of a problem. And this is the fundamental difference that we all need to understand the thought process. And architecture at Smita and Habib Khan Architects is a response to this and the realization of the importance and the appropriateness of the traditions of architecture that have gone by. And we as architects, you as young students of architecture need to pick up the threads that modernity has severed. The need to reinvent a new and more responsive architecture, which will be a continuum of this vernacular. And will be a response to climate, context, tradition, and culture. And of course, our lost construction techniques, importance of daylight, ramifications of heat, and appropriateness of built form, which will result into a new architectural vocabulary, a language which will have its roots in layers of traditional wisdom and not reinventing the wheel. And it will also be a fresh interpretation of modern construction techniques and all vernacular principles, building forms, architectural forms, and is also a link between the past and the present. The chain of evolution should continue in years to come. And this fundamentally we call contemporary vernacular. And that is the essence of contemporary vernacular architecture, wherein you are saying, if, for example, if the buildings that we are doing is excavated 1,000 years down the line, it should be evidently clear that it is built in 2020 and not 1120 or some AD or some BC, but it should be fitting into the time frame. So it is very important for us to understand that the time frame of any architecture is very, very important. The scale is very, very important. The time scale is very, very important. And so learn from the wisdom of the past. Do not reinvent the wheel, and then utilize your senses and your architectural learning to derive something. For example, this picture, if you will see, in traditional vernacular architecture, the wooden post used to go down into the mud walls and into the ground. And over a period of time, it used to decay because of termites and because of the moisture that it used to absorb from the wall. So what our traditional builders did was to separate the wall a little and have the post standing independently. Same thing happens when you make a steel pillar or a steel post, steel column. Same thing happens. So the steel starts getting rusted when it is encased inside a concrete or a brick wall. So we have learned and understood why this was done, and this is a modern interpretation of that. This is our Priyadarshini Institute of Architectural and Design Studies. Yeah. So this in a nutshell is contemporary vernacular.
I'll take it a little further, just discussing a little more on what contemporary vernacular means. This is the Priyadarshini Institute where Habib happens to be the director now. We want to go back to the roots. This is what contemporary vernacular stands for. Going back to roots, building sensibly, building optimally, building intelligently, building correctly. All of this, where we are concerned with context, climate, tradition, geology, geography, and economy. So all of these together and also connecting back to our roots.
Now this was,
So,
see, I mean, this was the, I'll just interfere in it. This was the thought process. This was the philosophy of the entire body of work that we have done over the last 30 years. But the students keep asking time and again as to, it is all right to have a thought process, to have a concept or a philosophy, but how do you convert that philosophy or that thought process into actual buildings or actual architectural design? So this is the method that Bismita is going to say. This is the method of how you can, convert the thought process into actual build form or into actual architectural design. So we have arrived at 10 points. We call it the 10 commandments. And if you are able to use all of them in your architectural designs, you will be able to build contextually and sensibly.
okay, so we just read the 10 commandments, which took some time to get formed, but at the end when they are formed, they are crisply put down in 10 points. We'll start one, respect for the local people and their economy. Respect for local climate, culture, and context. Respect for man and nature. Use of non-industrial building methods. 5 is reinventing and introduction of traditional building construction techniques.
It is not possible always. It is not possible always to have, use all of them together in a project or something. I mean, non-industrial building methods. So, I mean, I'm not saying you cannot use industrial building methods in your project, but use it sensibly, use it optimally, and use it logically. And that is what it means by non-industrial building methods, and so on. So every point has to be, read and understood in its context and its feasibility.
Right. So I continue on with point 6 is continuum of tradition. Imaginative use of traditional building techniques, space, and volume. So you can always learn from building traditional building techniques. One need not copy them, but like you just said that you have to think it through. How is it supposed to be relevant to us today? And then recycle and reuse, extremely important, because so much of building is now being brought down so that new buildings can come up, that there is a lot of opportunity to recycle and reuse. Let's do it wherever we can and in whichever best way we can. Then we come to innovation and finishes. When you're talking of recycle and reuse, then you have to think in terms of innovating of the finishes of the old materials as well as the new materials that will now come in sync with them. And 10th point is use of natural materials and an ecological approach towards using them.
And if you try if you imbibe all these 10 commandments, we are not giving you commandments like Prophet Moses did. We are only saying that these are the commandments that we give to ourselves. And if we follow these broader guidelines within the 10 commandments, you will not go wrong as far as, you are able to build a greener building, environmentally sensitive and sustainable buildings. So these are guidelines that and we thought that will be very useful for the students to understand and, build within the framework of those 10 commandments. Now, this is a project which is an engineering college campus that we've done. The clients approached us. I'll just explain this project and then we can run through quickly because we may run out of time. This is a project which has been very close to all our hearts, and it's a large campus of more than 5 lakh square feet. The clients approached us and said that, we wanted a different looking building. So we were wondering what's a different looking building. They didn't want an engineering college like an engineering college. So then we said, okay, fine. We started working on it. So this is the academic block that you are seeing, and it is punctured with a lot of courtyards inside, which takes diffuse light, which creates a buffer inside. And it is based on the principle that it's like a old town organically growing. The campus is like an old town which will grow organically. So if you see this facade, this development, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of development that you will see, just like it is like, if you recall, we said, can just stop for a while. So
Okay.
We said that there's a rigid framework, a flexibility which is given in a framework where everyone, 1, 2, 3, 4 owners have developed their houses in a street. but yet it falls into a framework, and that's the freedom that traditional architecture gives it to you. So in this you see that the lower floors are load bearing, which is heavy stonework. Next, please. And then the building starts getting little lighter. You see this is the stone work on the ground floor, and the building starts getting lighter and lighter as it goes up and rises up, which is a very logical decision and principle that our traditional builders used. So in this you see all buildings, all materials that you see, the sandstone on the ground floor, the metal structure, then the brickwork, and then no brickwork at all, with all the windows coming up, which is a very light top storied structure. The building sits, there's an admin block which sits sits in a water body to reduce the dryness of the heat and the climate, which changes the microclimate of the building. If you will notice, all the recycled materials, the granite columns, all windows, doors, furniture, everything that has been used in the building is recycled and reused and refurbished. There are various corridors, exposed brickwork. There is no RCC slab in the entire 5 lakh plus construction, because we feel that the concrete is the biggest culprit that happens in our country, which absorbs heat and then keeps radiating it back after 8 hours after the sun has gone down. So if the sun goes down at 6 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock in the evening in summers, you will feel uncomfortable in a concrete house till at least 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, when the nature takes over and starts purifying and starts cooling down the whole thing. This is a western facing facade. So what we've done is created a lot of baffle walls, long projections to cut down the heat. The heat is about 50 degrees in summers here. So, that kind of, and this project got us the Interbau Award. It's an Interbau founded by Prince Charles. And this was the building 2018 awardee for promoting traditional architectural concepts at a large scale in the world. And the art of stonework, stone masonry was totally lost. You see, this is the first stone masonry that was made by those people. When we hunted them, brought them on the site, they had forgotten their art. They had forgotten the dignity that goes with their art. And they were either plain masons or selling vegetables or doing something else. So we brought them back. It took some time, for them to understand and get in touch with their skills. So you will see the kind of finishing that is there in the first wall that they made and the next wall that they will make. Next, please.
Yeah, we just see the comparison of the new and the old walls.
Now, this entire walkway is a cobblestone driveway that reduces the heat. If you have a concrete road or a bitumen tar road, it reflects heat and creates a mini heat island there. So the entire driveway is cobbled sandstone driveway. The load-bearing arches.
And this is the new wall. If you see the old stone masonry and the new stone masonry, you will see how they improved their own skills once they came on site and they became confident. And you see this is the later phase of the building.
Later phase
of the campus.
And it provides a lot of dignity. It provides a lot of dignity to their skills. When you are using your skills and getting money out of it, earning money out of it, then you feel, inside it rejuvenates the local economy and it restores the dignity of your inherent traditional skills. Next, please. You can see look at the wisdom of our traditional builders. Go back, please. See that these are the traditional buildings. It's a 8 inches base granite column with 6 inches tapering. It's taking the load of 2 floors. 2 floors. In fact, there's one more floor on top, and about 2,000 students sitting there. While an RCC column needs about 9 inches by 12 inches minimum size because it buckles. But our granite column, traditionally built, takes the load of the entire structure. Next, please. All these are recycled, reused, refurbished. That's the entrance porch of the building. The main arrival where you arrive in the lobby. Traditional ironsmiths work from this region where we have used. The entrance lobby is contrary to what you can see. It's all open. There are no walls except a floor and a roof. So because that facilitates a lot of cross ventilation and flow of air. in this heat. So you don't need any air conditioning, you don't need any air cooling even in summers. Various corridors that you will see. So the slabs that you see are girders, and then you have over the girders you have stone, and then you have concrete. Yeah, continues.
So these are various spaces which you would never think belong to a part of an engineering college. These are the corridors, and especially notice the stone masonry. We're very pleased with how the stone masons really, picked up the whole art that they had lost.
The various corridors with exposed brickworks. That's a north-facing classroom with glass coming in. You just notice the slab, the roof. It's all girders, MS girders. We bought girders at 27,000 rupees a kg, and now it's 60,000 rupees a kg. So the kind of amount of steel that has gone into the building has paid back for the construction cost of the entire campus, if we sell the steel today. Diffuse lights from all over, shaded corridors, computer room.
And that's a computer lab.
North light. These are parrot brackets, which are very popular in the traditional Bohra community here. And so we have used Tota bracket, it's called parrot brackets. And you can see the playing marbles being used as sandwich between two glass for the door. And each section is colored blue, yellow, red, green. So chemical engineering is maybe blue and electrical is maybe green, so that you identify in the entire vocabulary, you are able to place make yourself and you can identify this is your department. Yeah. Next.
This is the new building of the Polytechnic. Yeah, it's behind the main engineering block.
And that you see, notice, no, just go back. There's an interesting thing, the interesting arrangement that has been done. The left-hand side is the northern side. So you'll see the building is lower on that side, and building keeps rising higher as it goes to the southern side to protect from the southern heat and also get the north light. So you'll see all the north light is coming inside the building from the north side, which is very important to take natural light. So the build form is arranged in such a manner that it gradually keeps rising up. The mass keeps rising up so that north light is not obstructed into the main areas of the building.
I think we are moving out from the JD campus, and these are other buildings. We have a stereotypical idea of how buildings should be, depending upon the function of the building. And if I were to ask you to guess the function inside this building, then I'm not sure it's going to be so easy. Let me tell you, because this is not an interactive session, that this is an IT building. This was made for an IT corporation that came into Nagpur. But whichever be the building, we have to be comfortable, and that's important. Whether you are working in IT, where you have the air conditioners working 24/7, or you are in any other typology of building. So this is something that we borrowed from Laurie Becker of your own state. And you must all be acquainted with his work. Yeah.
Another important aspect of this building, interesting aspect of this building, is that there's a baffle wall. There are two walls. The actual core of the building is inside, which is 5 feet inside, 1.5 meter inside. So all these services are, running air conditioning, cables, Cat6 cables, telephone, internet, everything is running within that cavity that is created by this baffle wall. This wall is outside, and the client wanted as usual, a typical glass sleek looking building, and we tried to convince. Ultimately budget came to our rescue, because that was costing 78 lakhs while this costed us 26 lakhs. So the client ran out of money, and this is what we did. And it's heavily inspired, like Sundar said, from Laurie Baker's architecture, where we gave these jalis, brick jalis, which not only takes care of the glare. See what happens when you make a building which is there on the left hand side, if you'll see, it is bringing in the glare, while the function that is happening inside is an IT and a computer screen oriented function. So you need to cut the glare out. So you give expensive blinds and expensive roll up blinds to, cut the glare out. So you're creating a problem, and then you're trying to give a solution by providing those expensive blinds. And also it brings in a lot of heat. Even if you use heat reflective glass, it brings in a lot of heat, and that increases the air conditioning load. In this, this outer skin was made 2 years after the building was completed, and the air conditioning load was about 200 and 225 tons was installed. But after the brick facade was complete, we now operate only on 125 tons of air conditioning load. So that is the kind of difference, which happens with intelligent, sensitive, and a little logical application of mind in your projects. But we don't learn from our mistakes. Let me
tell you, despite the building that is standing there, it is standing in the IT park that we have at Nagpur. You see the new buildings that are coming up around it, because this is how we are conditioned to think. We always think that it is glass, which is equal to IT, and so this is the way it is going. Slide. Yes. See, these are buildings.
We keep continuing the mistakes. We don't learn from our mistakes. We continue with our mistakes. We are doing the same thing with our architecture, with our cities and everything. So monstrous glass blocks are coming in place, and we are still not able to think rationally. This is a project that we did for a steel authority. And they wanted a glass building with steel and high-tech looking building, and the temperature was about 48 degrees where it was being built. We said it is not logical, but we wanted the project, so we gave them a glass blocks in steel with a large overhang to avoid direct sunlight. Glass is a wonderful material to use if you want to use it, but it has to be protected from direct heat. And then we gave these brick baffle walls, and the building sits in a water body to mitigate the dryness of the heat, to provide some little moist and humidity in the whole context. And the baffle walls, depending on whether it is west or south or whatever, so that it creates a flow of air, it cools down the air, the water body cools down the air, and it cuts the direct layer. So you can use your concepts and thought processes to mitigate a problem that comes either through the client or through the climate or the area where you're building.
Shall I move ahead with the projects?
Yeah, just go quickly, because we'll just tell you there's a competition that we participated for School of Planning and Architecture Bhopal, which we obviously did not win because the jury thought that this was not the vocabulary for futuristic architectural expression. Next, please. This is how the Northlight was taken into studios. These are the 5 studios that you had with a lot of meandering pathways and courtyards for interaction, discussions, traditional built form. A girls' hostel would have looked like this. This is a project that we're doing for a Banjara Community Museum for Gypsies. It's a huge project where the client wanted, they have a Nagada drum to beat. That is their symbol of their community. So the client wanted a drum like that structure. So we tried to convince him not to make a typical drum. And then we tried to derive an architectural form out of that concept of his. It's a 100% sustainable project. The entire 2 megawatt of solar is being installed here. The entire air conditioning is the largest museum in our country at the moment, with about 125,000 square feet of built up space. It's a very narrative experience, narrative museum, digitized museum coming up. And everything is sustainable here. Another, we do a lot of, ironically, a lot of temple redevelopment projects. This is another temple redevelopment project on the, that was also a temple redevelopment project that you saw. This is also a temple redevelopment project. Tourism, integrated tourism development project. Next. There's a guest houses, shopping complexes, interactive spaces wherein, the villagers can come, sit in the chowpal and, talk to each other, spend time while there's a guest house inside. Next, please.
Right. So we've changed the project now. This is the resort, and believe it, this is of the Taj group of hotels. And when they came into the wildlife sector, then this is a wildlife resort that we have very close to Nagpur, and this is at Bandhavgarh. Would like to tell the interesting story about Bandhavgarh?
The idea is the client wanted to have a village replicated because that's what an urban dweller would like to escape from the drudgery of the urban life and the monotony of the urban life and go and live like a villager. So we have tried to be as authentic as possible. There are a lot of interesting stories, but we'll run out of time. This was one of the most interesting projects that we did with Dean, also involved in the whole process. And the first time I had to shunt the contractor out and throw the contractor out because he was making the walls in 90 degrees and in plumb. So we said we don't want that. So we gathered the ladies of the villages who used to build houses traditionally there, and the entire resort was built by the ladies of the villages around, hand plastered, and we have all swimming pools, and you pay at that time when it was inaugurated about 70,000 rupees a night to escape from the drudgery of your that's the paradox that we all live in, wherein you keep running around earning money, and then you want to buy peace with that money that you want. So that's the paradox that we all are living in, and that's the entrance where you arrive. This is a coffee shop. There's a small courtyard outside where you can sit, relax in the jungle. And a very interesting part is this is in a bamboo forest, bamboo cluster, Bandhavgarh Tiger Sanctuary, and we have not cut or dislocated a single bamboo cluster or a clump. And we redid the plan. So there are 12 cottages in the lodge, and all the 12 cottages were realigned when the layout was being done. There's the lounge where you sit and watch. And I don't know if you guys know about mahua tree. Mahua is a local fruit and a local tree. And it is so contextual and so organic to the region that every part of that tree is utilized by the villagers. By the twigs, they make flour and they make rotis. The fruit is eaten it is a very therapeutic fruit, and you make wine out of the fruit as well. The local toddy is made out of that fruit. Everything of that is used by so this is how it sits into the whole thing. And we always talk of architecture being a non-verbal communication, and this we realized very effectively. Just go back, I'll just relate an experience. And
where do you want to go?
Back. Go back. So this one. See the pattern around the windows that you were seeing. We liked it because it was there in one of the, no, not this. We liked it very much because it was, there in almost all the houses and windows. You're going back. Anything is fine. Yeah. So we said, fine, let's copy this, ornamentation around the openings, and let's use it because it will be more authentic. But the ladies were giggling and refusing to do that. Then we realized in their language, we couldn't understand what the language was. So the supervisor told us that when you have this pattern that you're seeing around the doors of the openings, it communicates to in the village community that there is a marriageable daughter in the house. So that's architecture being used for non-verbal communication. So when the arrow is pointing up, ironically, it is the daughters, and when the arrows are pointing down, it is birth of a boy, so marriageable boy in the house. So that's how architecture and architectural motif is used for non-verbal communication in a society. So the owner of the house need not go and tell everyone that his daughter is marriageable now or is willing to marry. You see this. So just by using a motif, ornamentation in architecture, it is clear that there is a so that's a language understood vernacularly by the community. There's also another resort of the same group wherein you arrive at a courtyard. That's the arrival. Contrary to what you arrive in a hotel with an atrium and a lobby, you arrive into nothingness, and that's what you are basically going there to relax and do nothing. And the pots on the right side are basically lighting fixtures. You can sleep in the open in a machan wherein only the mosquito nets prevent you. To give you various kind of experiences, it's a very long. Even the lounge is an open lounge with no walls, just a roof.
And maybe since you're all from Kerala, you can see something very familiar out there, hanging there from the roof.
Yeah, the boats. The boats. Yeah. Next, please. Shanti days, give me peace, is what you are basically coming here for. I was just discussing the paradox that we all live in. So this is a toilet block extension in metal and wood and stone plinth, and it's all open glass. If you are not ashamed, you can shower in the within the glass framework. We have given a lot of open. We introduced the concept of open shower into a courtyard. So you to be as romantic as you can, and so unless there is romance in the whole designing process, you cannot unless you love yourself, you cannot love someone else. So that's the concept of making and being involved in the whole process of design, and each and every detail has to be looked into. This is a yoga hall in another resort that we've done. The reception of another resort. No walls, no windows. And this is a very interesting project of contemporary vernacular, wherein you will notice, I don't know those of you who know what a space frame is. The space frame structure is supporting a Mangalore tiled, terracotta tiled roof. And it's about a 4,000 square feet of built space on 8 columns on the periphery, no central columns. So you'll see those typical space frame structural system supporting a traditional building material. The reception sitting in the water body, paved in shaded walkways. That's how, bamboo gives you that light patterns when you walk into the corridors. Another resort nestled into the river bank, Maua 1, mud plastered walls and dining area without windows. It's all open. Just you need a shade over your head to protect you from the sun and rain. That's it. And that's you closer to nature. Same dining from a different angle, different bedrooms, recycled windows, recycled wood, refurbished. Everything is refurbished here as well. Sandstone. We can go quickly now, so we're running out of time.
Yeah, I will just move ahead.
There's a residence in sandstone.
It's done in a very different style because that's what the client insisted. So sometimes, yes, there are client insistences and something that they love, but they love the idea of using sandstone in its.
This is a very interesting point that you're saying. I mean, this becomes colonial architecture, the British architecture that was there in and around Nagpur is also our heritage. So it's also our vernacular now. That's also a part of our legacy of architectural inheritance that we have had. So even if we build like this, it's perfectly all right because that's also your heritage and your culture. Your heritage does not mean that you go back to Vedic times or how the earlier builders built or how the Mughals built. But everything that has happened in the chain of evolution is your inheritance. Use of water bodies is very important to mitigate the dryness of the heat that we all have here. That changes the microclimate of the whole thing. Very interesting project. There's also a resort, very high-end resort, which unfortunately could not be built. 90,000 to 1 lakh rupee a night per couple was the. And it's a very interesting design. If you will see meandering, brick paved pathways, and then you have a cottage which is 1,000 square feet with an independent swimming pool and things like that, and courtyards and machans and everything to sleep, enjoy, whatever. Anyway, this is built but not operational yet. Structural system is very important to work out. Like we told you, reintroduction of structural system. Very, very close to our heart house, which was built earlier. Everything is recycled here. Everything is recycled except pots and pans and tapestry. Thanks. The staircase, the wooden floor from the textile mills, everything. These are all solar, this is also a very interesting project. This is a wayside amenities on highways, National Highway Authority of India. We've given a proposal and it has been accepted. The entire bridge module that you see is a solar module. So it not only generates electricity for the entire facility, but also provides electricity to the rural areas. And as you go down next, please, as you drive down, there are panels which will generate electricity as well. So not only it provides electricity to the facility, but it also providing excess electricity. Instead of going back to the grid, we are giving it to the villages or villages around. Next. The wayside amenities, all solar paneled roofs, generating electricity, sitting, relaxing, eating, toilet facilities, other facilities besides fueling stations. So
we're just trying to sum up now. Yeah, we're just trying to sum up now in terms of context. That
you saw the thought process, you saw the
yes.
thought process, you saw the method to convert it, and then you saw the result and the output of this entire process. Now, what is the learning that you carry? Smita will tell you what are the learnings that you carry from this whole process.
Yeah, I just move across the slides because these have really been labeled out very well. So we're talking of context where we're talking of the nature culture relationship. So you will now be able to relate to what has we've run through all the projects. And this is how the response to context is coming out in terms of the design output. This is the JD College as we are seeing, and various different spaces. Very important to say is that this has a distinct character. And I think it's very important if in an educational institution, you grew up in a place that has a distinct character and a character which carries the feeling of nostalgia with it, because that's what you carry along for the rest of your life. You know, this is very important. I think something which has been lost with the international style, and where we do not really connect to the land, connect to the context or to the people. Massing and surroundings. Also
what is the massing around you? What are the surroundings? You know, what is the interplay of light and shadow? You know, all these are very important aspects when you work with context. Context doesn't mean ki agar there's a building like this, so we make a building like that. Context means so many things, and these are the things that she's trying to enlist.
Light and shadow is such an important thing of architecture. Like Le Corbusier said that architecture is actually a magnificent composition of volumes that come under the light. So actually is a light that is the first ornament that a building gets. See what light can do. This is a shadow of the fascia putty that you have, you know, the fascia that you have at the end of the sloping roof. This is in our house, the eaves board. And here in the morning, you have this wonderful design that comes out as a shadow because it's been designed so that the shadow comes out very amazingly on the wall. This is getting the not light in the studios.
Students,
yes.
The students these days say that, you know, when you ask in a jury, what is your concept? So they say, we are trying to use we have used natural light and ventilation. That's not a concept. That's a fundamental of architecture. You know, so, and that romance that needs to be created in every space that you design. You have to, I mean, if you see, when you go to an ancient building, a traditional building, you feel at ease, you feel at peace, you feel very good, you feel calm, quiet. Why do you do that? Because of the kind of involvement of the architect and the builders that was there. Each and every detail was worked out, each and every thing was thought out, you know, and that is the use of light and shade as well. And you can feel the romance that the person has done with so much of involvement in the building, as if that person fell in love with what he was doing.
He's talking of romance and he's talking of being involved. And I have a little story to tell you over here really quickly. That you see this wall here made of various different bits of colored tiles. This is our tiling contractor who is so much in love with the projects, and he knows what happens with his skill being a part of the building environment. So he goes ahead and makes this wall. And then we think it is overtly colored, but it's just a matter of how involved he was in coming forward with what he thinks is an amazing creation. So this is how even the tradesmen, the craftsmen,
even the client,
various skills, even the clients, yes, in this
client
case,
is
even
so
the client.
involved in the process of building that when this courtyard was being built, let us say, he used to stand here and say, sir, we'll sit here and see the tree, so we'll keep a bench here. You know, that is the kind of involvement. You know, each and every space in a huge campus, he was involved so much with the building process, and that romance and that love is seen, you know, in the output of the spaces that we design. This again, Priyadarshini Institute.
This is the Priyadarshini School, yes.
See the light and shadows, you know, the interplay of light and shadow is very important for any space to be worked out well. Next. Endless vistas, indulgence, you know, your visitor should indulge in your spaces, in your design. When you walk, you make him awake. When you're walking down a corridor, he should be interested in seeing, you know, what is beyond that corridor. Create that kind of interest where that is indulgence. Your viewers and your users have to be indulgent in your spaces that you design. They should be excited at every step. They should wonder whether they should look right, left, ahead, you know, and then you should be inclined to go ahead and walk and see what is at the corner. Light is also an artist, and you can use it as a canvas in your projects, in your spaces. Whether it is artificial or natural. Create exhilaration at unexpected places, the partitions in urinals, you know, a very mundane but a natural activity can also create some interest by your designs. The temperature of a space is very important. The warmth of a space, the coldness of a space, is very important. You have to learn all these things, and that's what our traditional architecture actually teaches us. The contrast, romance of the wall and sunlight, the interaction with the sun and its moods. Louis Kahn said, sun never knew its importance unless the light hit a wall. So, morning sun is different, afternoon sun is different, evening setting sun is different. You have to exploit the sun in all its glory, and that gives the moods that you have in your buildings, in your spaces. Similarly, walls and the interplay of light and shadow with the sun is should become a very integral part of your designs. You have to create a stage for the sun to play. It is such a wonderful natural element. Create a stage for it to play. The warmth of materials, the tactile nature, the texture of materials. Yes. The materials are living beings. Consider materials as living beings. You are a living being. You have a relationship with you have a relationship with a particular person. You gel with a particular person better than you gel with another person. Similarly, materials also have relationships with each other. They have their temperature. They have their warmth. They have their interaction. You have to learn what is the look at the relationship between two materials. How does stone talks to brick? How brick talks to plant? How plants, or how plants talk to the earth or to the sky. You need to understand the relationship of these materials as everything that goes into your building. Consider it as a living material, living being, and then you will understand the importance, whether whether you are friends with stone or whether brick is a friend with stone or no. So that is something that we need to learn and be sensitive to understand in our designs. Next. Solids and voids can be exploited to your advantage. Unfolding excitement. I mean, look at the roofs which start from the grounds, and you don't know what is starting where, what is ending where, and that's a sense of mystery, a sense of exhilaration that you can create in your projects. User interface.
This is an amazing space. It's a user interface. The space created an area where the students could engage and contribute to what was already standing there. That's how it is. It becomes a user interface because it encourages the user to become a part of it. So you welcome them on. Why don't you add to it?
And then it gives a sense of belonging. A particular group of students would have worked on this art mural, and sometime, and that is a belongingness that a person has, that user gets bonded to the space that you've designed, to the building that you've designed. It will always be etched in his memory that he contributed in the process of, building this space or building this building.
Wait, I think...
emotional response, unless your spaces and buildings evoke emotional response in your user, you have failed as a designer. So that emotional response, whether it is good or bad, you may hate a building when you go. I hate a particular architect's building, he or she, but it evokes a response, it evokes an emotion in me, and that evoking of that emotion is very important. And then you become a good, successful architect.
I think we have come to a conclusion.
Next, please. Next, just press the button. See, our architecture this is fundamental of our thought process, and architecture is based on the fundamental philosophy that in the eternal journey of my soul, I am a visitor on this earth. And I have inherited, apart from many things, architecture. And that when I leave this earth, nothing of me will remain. My body will merge with nature. My architecture, whenever it dies, shall do so too. That to me is real sustainability, absolute truth, and the foundation of true architecture in the world, which basically means that you use materials in such a manner that just like my body will be gone with the earth, merged with earth, you create materials, you use materials in your body. Whenever your building dies, hypothetically, metaphorically, the materials that you use shall be consumed by Mother Earth. And that is the fundamental of all sustainable architecture in the world. There is nothing else. There is no green, environment-friendly, whatever high-flying terms you would want to use, high-flying rating systems that you would want to use. It is all useless scrap. This is the fundamental of being sustainable to a large extent, to a greater extent than anything else. And that is the fundamental lying thought process of our architecture, of our thought process. This is the summary of our thought process. And this needs changing of mindsets. Next, please. This is changing of mindsets. And unless that happens, unless we change our minds, we will not be able to achieve this. So thank you so much for listening to us so patiently.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for this patient listening.
It has been a wonderful presentation. I would say that it has been an architectural delight for all of us. And it was just like listening, like reading a Vitruvian book of 10 books of architecture, listening to 10 commandments of architecture, and the profound way in which you have given intervention to make internationalism, to make it very much regionally modern is remarkable, very remarkable, eye-opener. I would say that it is really a redefining moment. Your practice spread over 3 or 4 decades. It's marvelous. And definitely it conveys a sense of continuity. It obviously has a very meaningful contextual linkage. So in all ways and all manner, I believe your sessions and your architecture is very meaningful, and definitely it will remain intact and the identity will prevail beyond times. Thank you, Ms. Smita ma'am, and thank you, Habib sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us here. If there are any questions.
Yeah, we would like to take the questions.
And I would want to thank Mr. Mohammad Kuti for being here for the entire presentation for an hour. An honor.
Thank you very much, sir. Actually, I should thank you because you are, this Sunday, you take time to us because we are planning to such people like you together come here for our decision, and we invite you after this pandemic. You both of you, our Kerala, inshallah, and Mr. Ashish will take care about this.
Yes, absolutely. Our pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions someone want to ask, students or something if they want to interact?
Akhil, we could open up the forum for queries.
Yeah. Yes. Now it's a question and answer section. It's open for the audience to ask questions.
Hello. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. First of all, thank you very much for talking to us and enlightening us. And actually, I'm a very keen follower of both of you. And I have actually watched a lot of talks in YouTube. And that Genda full concept presentation, that was the one presentation which I liked the most. And there was one single question which was tangling in my mind right then. That is, now you have shown us the concept of contemporary vernacular architecture. So here you clearly made us understand that how to pick up the key elements of the past and incorporate it into the modern world. But sir, when we now look around the world, we are now very much moving towards generic design and parametrism. Like we are very much inspired by it, but at the same time, we are also blinded by it because we are seeing this coin-shaped building and wing-shaped building and all. So now, just like how you have incorporated vernacular and contemporary, what's your view on incorporating vernacular architecture into this generic and parametric kind of design? For example, like 3D printed clay buildings supported with genetically modified trees and all.
You'll answer or should I?
Yes, I would like to know.
You answer. He has a question for you. He's been hearing you since the Genda Phool days.
No, we deliberately avoided the Genda Phool thing because we thought we were speaking in Kerala, so probably you will not understand the Hindi and the context. So we avoided the Genda Phool thing. It's nice that you've been listening to all this, and see, there's a fundamental flaw in the question that you have asked. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's a very intelligent question coming from a student. Fundamental flaw in the terms of generic design. And we were talking against generic design. It is not generic. Design cannot be generic. Design has to be specific, has to respond to a context. Parametricism, genetically modified trees are a byproduct of a thought process. They are not the thought process by themselves. So if you want me to answer it lightheartedly, we are going towards our doom. When we are trying to, so you will modify genetically a human being, which we already started doing that. You modify trees genetically for what? I mean, the trees are so beautiful, so complete, living things in themselves. If there are no trees, you are not there. You are dead, because no one will be able to process carbon dioxide that you exhale. So why do you want to genetically modify? I mean, that's a fundamental question that all human beings need to think. But when it comes to parametricism, you're talking of the architecture of Zaha Hadid or Calatrava or whatever XYZ. There's nothing wrong in building. Let us understand in which context it is being built. Parametricism or the kind of architecture, and what are the economics involved in the whole thing? What are the materials involved in the whole thing? What is the structural system involved in the whole thing? Can our country afford it? Can our country go for it? Is it sensible enough to make that kind of architecture in our country? Is what we need to think. And when we will be able to be overdeveloped, when our GDP will be thousands and thousands of dollars, we will be able to afford it. Now you see Frank Gehry's Bilbao Museum or any other building, it's all titanium clad. You bloody can't afford to use 100 the cost of material which is costing as titanium, and there you're using titanium building material as your cladding and as your roofing. So these things have to be understood by us. Today we are unable to even clad our buildings with the cladding material of ceramic that was produced by John Utzon when the Sydney Opera House was made. Sometimes, I don't know how many years ago. We are still unable to produce that in our factories, in our country. So is it logical to use something which the developed, so-called economically self-sufficient world, whether we are in a position to use it today, is a question that we need to fundamentally answer within our own selves, and then we can go. It's all glamorous to see parametricism and to see those high-flying material and spaces and techniques. It's very good to look at Calatrava's designs. The students get enamored by Zaha Hadid and Calatrava and Gehry and so on and all. But when it comes to a Smita or Habib Khan or a Dean D. Cruz or someone else from our country, we are all peanuts, because you don't are enamored by the kind of thought process that we all have, because this is not glamorous. What we are running is a marathon. What they are running is a 100-meter dash. You will know who is the fastest man on earth, but you will never know who is the marathon winner in Olympics. Can you name? But you will know Usain Bolt or anyone else, the fastest man on earth, because that's a short-lived, glamorous thought process, which will not sustain your country.
I think what the student spoke just now just took us back to the time when we were ourselves very young and just about in practice. And like I told you, yes, that was deconstruction. And that's how you realize that these things are very short-lived. Somehow we have to respond to the fact that.
Yes, thank you, sir. You again opened my eyes. So thank you very much.
To get swayed by glamour is all good. You have to understand the fine line dividing fashion and style. There was a time when we used to wear those bell bottoms. Sometimes it was drain pipes. Now we have shorter length trousers. So these are all fashions in architecture. But the fundamental premise and the thought process is what exists within your soul. When you wear a tie, it was a broader tie, then the ties became narrow, and the style of the coats changed. Everything keeps changing. These are styles, which you have to understand. But the fundamental premise, which is the soul inside, which if you would have seen that explanation of the Genda Phool song, that is more important to us, and that is what we are talking of.
Yes, sir, very much right.
Any other queries?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for being part of the program, and it actually enlightened me very much. What I want to ask was, I was inspired by your contemporary vernacular thought process. So what I want to ask was, is there any limitations? What I want to ask was, is there any limitations to the process? Like we are going to be a space needing community towards the future. So we must be building a lot of high-rise buildings. So in that sense, there could be so much more limitations to the contemporary vernacular design. So what are your thoughts on that as an experienced person?
There is no limitation. There is no limitation in the thought process. It's we have shown you a kind of projects that we are interested in, that we do, and that we get. But it's a thought process wherein we are not saying you should not make high-rise buildings, or you should not use glass, or you should not use concrete. We're not saying that. What we are saying is, if you learn from the learnings of the past or the vernacular, you have to understand the wisdom behind it, and you have to understand the process behind it. And if that process you can fit in a high-rise building, there's nothing wrong in that. There's another thought process which is also very important: is why do we need a high-rise building? Does it sound logical to you? Is another thought process. I'm not trying to say that do not make high-rise buildings. We're talking of shortage of space in cities. We're talking of shortage of so many other infrastructure facilities. So when you give a high-rise building, which is say 20 floor, 40 floors high, you're trying to solve the city's problem of space and city's problem of housing. But the fundamental premise is who has defined these boundaries, and who has defined the cost, and who has defined what should a city look like? Why do we need a high-rise building? Why can we not have optimally worked out cities where a city can live? Quality of life. We discussed man is always rooted to earth, that he is, brought in from and will go back to from. So when you make a person stay on the 22nd floor of a building or 48th floor of a building, devoid of the contact with Mother Earth, what kind of quality of life is that man leading? Or why do we need this? Shall we not strive to change the whole concept of development, whole concept of infrastructure development? Shall we not empower our rural economy and our agricultural sector so that people do not migrate towards cities and pressurize the existing infrastructure of the cities, wherein you need to make bigger and bigger cities? We have traffic issues, we have transportation issues, and we have infrastructural issues. Shall we not address these fundamental problems? And we as students of architecture, we as architects are the right people to address this issue, wherein we say the city is optimal and the quality of life of my citizens in my city is good, is livable. We are creating air quality indexes which are running into hundreds, wherein if you go abroad and see the Western world, it is not even 1 and 2. When it goes to 2, they leave the cities and go to countryside. And we are living, Delhi today is 396, while my city is 78. So what kind of quality of life we are having? So let us fundamentally address this issue. But answering your question, traditional wisdom, traditional knowledge of vernacular and the process of vernacular can be understood to apply in a high-rise building or any other building as well. You saw a campus which was large campus, 40 acres, 5 lakh square feet. It was applied there, where you probably never thought an engineering college campus could look like this. And so on and on. So a vertical building also can be not only looking like that, but using the principles of the process of vernacular architecture.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. My question is to you, ma'am. Have you ever faced difficulties as a female architect? Because as a female architecture student, I feel so many difficulties. So can you also give some inspiration? You are also an inspiration to us, and can you just give us a few thoughts about being a leading female architect like you?
Thanks, but I'm really not leading, nor do I want to lead. We have these very skewed up notions about who leads or who is famous or why should you be famous and why should you be a star architect. And if you're a star architect only, then your life has to move towards becoming a star architect. because of these notions that we all kind of are conditioned in, that makes life more miserable. So let's first understand there are difficulties, and maybe as girls, yes, we face them a little more. But it's also because we all try to align ourselves to a certain definition that has somehow been accepted in the world. More than talking about me as a woman, let me just delve a little bit on why in the field of architecture, we only say that if you're an architect who makes a building, then you're an architect. If you don't make a building, then you're not an architect. It's not like that. What I'm trying to say is, in a field like architecture, it's a mother field. It's a mother course for 5 long years. You've not studied only making buildings, and you have studied so many other things. They've been part of art that you studied, a part of technology, a little bit of computer, a lot of social science. Haven't you been educated in so many aspects? So it's like a mother field. And I'll come to this point of being a woman slightly later, because I understand this is a problem many girls and many women are facing. And I'll just come to that. So, why we think that at the end of 5 years, everybody, the men, the women, the boys, the girls, they all have to get into practice, and they all have to practice making buildings. Now, it is little difficult for every person who graduates to start making buildings. But there are so many lateral fields that are adding to this mother field, that are enriching the mother field. Can we talk about a few of them? See, there are architects, men and women, boys and girls, who've gone into journalism, they've gone into photography, they've gone into interior designing, there are plenty of people who do landscaping, there are plenty of people who've gone into entertainment. So you see, the field is quite wide. So if you think that there is a difficulty, because I think most of this difficulty stems from the fact that we always align with this one singular thought: architect, make a building. If you don't make a building, you're not a successful architect. So you see, half the problems of most of the women arise because it's very difficult to stand in the world in a practice all by yourself. And currently it is extremely male dominated. I would agree with that. It does need a bit of hand holding, a bit of support. Yes, that's probably what you are. So there are many fields open to you. Making buildings is one of them. So I think that's how it is. And at this end, we have a women's committee now in the COA, and we are learning now to look at the whole gender issue in architecture. So yes, as a part of it, we would be reaching out to all the women architects and the women, the girl students too.
Thank you, ma'am.
I will also add in a little, being the only man in the house with 2 daughters and my wife, and working almost all my life with women associates. And in my college, where more than 60% are girl students, yes, there is a bias. And I have noticed when I go on site, and when Smita used to go, or daughters used to go, or my associates used to go, there is a kind of a defiance in the contractor's mind. And if the instruction is coming from a woman, they do not accept it. They will cross-check either with me or with a man architect, so-called. So there is a difference, and this is more so, unfortunately, in the northern part of our country. And as you come down, it mellows down a little. I don't know what the situation is in Kerala, but there is a gender bias definitely in the construction industry. It's not so much in terms of client, in terms of corporate sectors or corporate houses, but yet I have seen in corporate meetings wherein women architect is doing a presentation, and the CEOs or the owners have no confidence on that women architect. There is a bias, and it is time that we men change our point of view, and look at women as equal contributors to our profession, not only our profession, but in building of our nation. And that needs to change. We need to change. I always say that, pardon me is saying this in your institute, but all those ladies who wear burqas and hijabs and all, I say they need not do that. It is men who need to put a veil on our eyes. We have to improve our viewpoint, not them. So it is the same with architecture. And keeping that in mind, we have, like Smita just said, she's a part of that women's committee. We are addressing a lot of issues, gender disparity issues in architecture, and hope we'll succeed very shortly.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
And before we end, Asif, I'll do my job, being the president of the council.
Definitely, sir.
To all, to all the students, I'm sure some of you might be knowing what Council of Architecture is and what it does. But if you don't know, Council of Architecture is constituted under the Architects Act of 1972. Architecture is fortunate enough to have a governing act which regulates profession and education, so that you all get better quality of education, and you all, when you become architects, your profession is also regulated and governed by a body which is the Council of Architecture. So that's the role of the Council of Architecture, and the fundamental efforts that we are making with my team, me as the president and my team, is to restore the dignity of architects in this society and make society aware of what is the contribution of an architect and what is the contribution of architecture in nation building. That is our fundamental promise. I always say that doctors make a very tangible contribution to the country by looking after the health of the citizens. And it's a very tangible contribution. When you are ill, when you are not well, when you are not in a happy frame of mind, you go to a doctor. But architects contribute intangibly to the building of the nation and the quality of life and well-being of our citizens, because the quality of spaces that you design, the kind of buildings that you design, actually affect your life 24/7. If I make a bad space, a bad building, it will affect you indirectly, and you will never come to know that the building or the space that I have designed is affecting you. Architects are actually the well-being, are the custodians of the well-being of our country's citizen, and that is a very important role that architects play. And it is our effort to the Council of Architecture to make the society aware of architectural significance in their lives and also in nation building. So this is what the Council of Architecture does, and we are opening up, and we have a very strong presence in the social media as well. We are trying to reach to every age group of our fraternity, right from fresh students to fresh graduates to middle level architects and to senior architects, and all academics. Like Smita said, there are so many avenues that you go into, whether it is academics, whether it is profession, or anything related allied field. We're trying to reach out and build a homogeneous fraternity which will be a strong voice maker in our country. So that's the role of the Council of Architecture for those students who didn't know. Opportunity and more patiently.
Smita ma'am, Habib sir, I once again like to reiterate that your thoughts, your practice, your portfolio rightly depicts the meaningful defiance against the existing notions of architectural modernism, against urbanism, and obviously our outlook of life as such. So I am very sure that today's short presentation would go a long way in the minds of the listeners. Also, we have shared this presentation live. So more than the audience we have right now, I guess your voice, your thoughts, both of your thoughts would definitely reach a long way. I sincerely thankful for your kind words. And I would like to again emphasize, like just like listening to Vitruvius' 10 books of architecture, your practice definitely imbibes a lot of meaning. And I'm sure in the coming days, it will make, just like the session was started, Jahan ka वापस आएंगे वो दिन. I'm sure that, you know, with your approaches, we definitely वापस आएंगे वो दिन for अच्छा. Thank you, sir. Now
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite our head of the department, Architect Divya Denchayan, to formally give a vote of thanks.
Morning, sir. Morning, ma'am. It's great to have you here with us. Very enlightening talk. I mean, actually, the students need to actually see the entire thing, like in a comprehensive way, like how architecture is conceptualized and how it goes all the way to its execution. And when we talk talk only about concepts, and by the end of the day, it never actually reflects in the design actually. So, but the things that actually my takeaway, I would say it's like the first thing is that the title itself, that vocal for local, it actually reflected more when you said that it's as the first commandment of the 10 that you enlisted, that is the empowering of the local masons to rejuvenate the local economy. So that exactly is what we need. That is the need of the hour, actually. And it was very interesting, actually. I don't know. This must have been something that most of the people missed. That is that we actually lost the connection from history. There was a that evolution, the links of evolution that we kind of lost after the industrialization. So we need to actually re-establish and reinvent the lost links so as to actually have more meaning to the architecture that we are going to live from now on, right? So this must be some new and very rejuvenating kind of concepts that the children actually must have got to know today. So and always they can always fall back to the very useful 10 commandments that you gave today. So if ever they are in doubt, like, okay, what is this, what should I do next, okay, they should go, they can actually go back and check if they have already they've actually missed something, or if they are following something from these 10 commands and all. It is very interesting and very informative talk. And on behalf of Al Islam Institute of Architecture, I thank you both, Smita ma'am and Habib sir, for being with us today and for giving such an informative talk. And we look forward to having you at our campus once all this COVID situation goes down. Thank you so much for being online
Thank
with
you.
us. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a refreshing change from all the amendments and the policies and the rules and regulations that I've been talking about. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman,
Thank you
sir,
so
for
much.
also being with
Bye.
us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.